Welcome to Love and Life. I'm Dr. Karen Anderson Abril here with my co-host,
Pastor Elliot Anderson.
And Love and Life is your place to hear conversations grounded in psych research, psychotherapy,
and biblical truth
to help us thrive in love and life. So my all-time favorite person to talk anything related to medicine, pharmaceuticals, and certainly health freedom is psychiatric nurse Dave Wayne. He is back with us today to talk about a massive announcement on autism, which Kennedy had promised way back when he was first confirmed. That was one of the first things he said. He said by September, they would have gone over a lot of the research that had not been thoroughly investigated, or I would say probably not even ethically conducted in the first place. And they were going to come out with some statements about autism. I will share, Dave and I have not talked about this at all yet. So you guys are just right with us for this very candid and first pass through this information. For me personally, I was thrilled. I know some in Maha were like, Tylenol is not the issue, but I think you and I can dig a little bit deeper into what is the issue. But I will just say at the top, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts, Dave, for that sort of platform with the most powerful government officials in the land to actually acknowledge that there is something happening that's not genetic. Okay, let's throw that out because that's something that people like to say, well, it's just genetic. Oopsies. No, you don't have this kind of exponential increase in cases and diagnoses in the span of a generation. Genes do not mutate that quickly. So that we can absolutely toss that out on its face. But for him to, and I mean Trump and Kennedy, for both of them to say, okay, yeah, maybe the most of the focus was on Tylenol. But even in Trump's initial statement, he said something, and in his Trumpian way, he's not a medical professional. So it was a little like clunky. Let's put it that way. It was clunky, but he said something to it, the effect of, even in his initial statement, there are some communities where children are not taking all these substances, meaning Tylenol. And then he alluded to also vaccines. And I was like, are you kidding me? This was just said on national TV at a press conference. I was so thrilled for all those autism moms who have been begging for someone to acknowledge this. Then he looks to Bobby. He's like, isn't that right, Bobby? And Bobby steps up for a second. Yes, for example, the Amish. And then Trump went back. But just that alone, to have that uttered for us in the medical freedom community, I was like almost shaking. I was with my mom and I'm like, Mom, he said it. He said it. He said it. I was so thrilled. So Dave, give me your perspective, and it's okay if you're not as thrilled as me, but that's where my heart was.
It was nice to see them acknowledge it with such a big platform like they have. And I really like how it was pointed out how the party of believe all women was called out for, unless they're saying that their child changed right after vaccination, then we do not believe all women. Yeah. And to your point about the genetic testing, that has turned into such a blame the victim game. We have genetic testing now for cancer risk. We have genetic testing now for mental health risk. And what psych meds should you be taking based off these genetic tests? And that's all a very profitable distraction from the fact that people are getting cancer from the poisons that they're eating and these environmental exposures, just like autism. All this genetic stuff is an expensive, profitable smokescreen for the very companies that are causing the diseases that they're giving people these tests for, and then they're blaming the person. It wasn't us. It wasn't the chemical plant 15 miles down the road from where you live. It was your genes. It's your fault. It's just that. Yeah, I'm glad you called attention to that.
Well, it's laughable. And I didn't even do like 23andMe or one of those. I'm thinking, I don't need my DNA out there in some lab that I don't trust who is doing some whatever experimentation. And I mean, what's the next step? Genetic testing. And then you have a pre-existing condition and insurance won't cover it because we found out you've got cruddy genes. So even if they do come up with something, do I trust that information to somehow strip away my right to treatment because I'm just damaged genes? That's not inconceivable. That would be a next step. Back to autism, I want to speak to, let me give you, this is from Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. I wanted to read this. She says, To everyone saying this is a distraction, meaning the Tylenol bit, you're missing the point. Vaccines are and always have been the primary driver of autism. That truth hasn't changed. Tylenol doesn't replace that reality, it compounds it. By depleting glutathione, it makes the body more vulnerable to vaccine injury. This is not about either or, it's about exposing the entire toxic system that has harmed our children for decades. So again, I know some in Maha were feeling that the Tylenol was a distraction. They were disappointed. I, for one, like I said earlier, I was like, that's okay, because some of this stuff, we've got so many bought and paid for politicians, bought and paid for by Big Pharma, that Bobby's having to do a lot of sneaking in the side door with a lot of this. That's my impression. The whole press conference was like 40 minutes late. And I looked at my mom and I said, they're fighting. They are 100% fighting right now because Trump is going establishment and Bobby is like, no, I have got to make good on my promise to these mothers, to these families, to these poor babies. And I don't know if they were fighting or not, because it seemed like they were pretty much in one accord when they presented the information. But that to me is the point that, okay, so I was thinking about this too, Dave, and I want to hear what you think. So I was thinking the Tylenol could be a spurious correlation because, and I don't really think so, because here we have Tylenol saying back in 2017, I saw a tweet was floating around that they're like, we've never recommended pregnant women. I mean, frankly, we've told pregnant women, do not eat soft cheese, do not have deli meats. Of course, we tossed that out the window during COVID. Get 17 COVID jabs, please. And again, but we've never recommended pregnant women do hardly anything because we want to preserve that baby's life in utero. But here, so also what could be happening with Tylenol, babies get jabbed with MMR and DTaP and God knows what else. And then they have a fever. Mom gives them baby Tylenol and then they have seizures and so forth. So was it initially the Tylenol, or is Dr. Tenpenny is saying it's all compounded? And of course, when these babies go in to have their wellness checks, oftentimes the pediatrician does not ask if they've recently had a fever, a normal just sickness where their immune system is already compromised because they're just not paying attention because they've got 700 kids to see that day and they want them in them out, jab them up and get them out. So what do you think about all that?
Yeah, it's that whole distinction between correlation and causation. And when you put it in the context of that Senate hearing a few weeks ago where Aaron Siri, Toby Rogers, and I believe his name was Jake Scott testified in front of Ron Johnson's committee. One of the things they talked about was this giant study comparing the health of the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, not just regarding autism, but also regarding all these other childhood illnesses, ear infections, upper respiratory infections, that sort of thing. And
ADHD and all the allergies that weren't around when we were kids. Go ahead.
And the unvaccinated kids were drastically more healthy. They were getting all those illnesses far less. So that is far fewer fevers and far less need for a medication like Tylenol. So that's where the correlation versus causation comes in. And yeah, what are we doing that our kids are so unhealthy now? It's exposures to a wide variety of things. And these are all massively complex systems. I mean, you do not get more complex than neurological development plus epidemiology plus immunology. Like these are massively complex systems and topics. So.
And I was also encouraged because, and I can't remember if it was Trump or Kennedy, but I think it might have been Trump was saying these heavy metals that have been used as adjuvants. Did I say that right? Adjuvants.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think thimerosal, I think some of them have been pulled out, but I think they've been replaced with other metals. I believe there's still aluminum at times to try to activate the immune system. And that crosses the blood-brain barrier, if I'm not mistaken. So to even speak out to these heavy metals that aren't part of these, it kills me. You see these memes online in our medical freedom community where they'll show like a cupcake and then a vaccine. And they're like, yeah, you're going to know every single ingredient on this cupcake if you walk out of the bakery with it. But do you know what any of these ingredients in this vaccine, if you even bother to open up the insert and look at it? And many of these vaccines, even the childhood ones, probably specifically, they show all those in the insert. But it's just like the manufacturers acknowledge and admit, even not like in COVID where they buried a lot of that data and tried to gaslight everyone and probably still do. But they admit that these are possible side effects, but then still like, no, couldn't be the vaccines. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. They took mercury out right around 2000, something like that. But yeah,
Okay.
they've been using aluminum as an adjuvant since then. And when you're talking about heavy metals like that, speaking of aluminum, one of the things that really stood out to me recently, this was one of those another conspiracy theory come true type moments, was that flooding down in Texas. And people were saying, like, it's some of these weather modification programs that caused this flooding in Texas. And they get dismissed as conspiracy theorists. And then the CEO of a company down in Texas came out and said, we weren't doing cloud seeding in the days before the flood, so it wasn't us. And people are like, wait, what? You've been doing cloud seeding? And then he does some more interviews and he talks about how with just a couple drones and a few pounds of this aluminum material, they can cause, it was some ridiculous amount, like 2 million gallons of rain to fall. Like, wait, what? This is real? This is a thing? And then you look into it more and it's like, oh yeah, they're doing this all over the country, all over the world. But then, you have these tiny, tiny, tiny particles of aluminum that end up being dispersed all over crops, all over cattle, all over the things that we eat and the things that, grazers eat and down into the groundwater. And like, what are we doing here? And why do these conspiracy theories keep coming true?
Everything's on the table for me at this point, Dave. Everything is on the table. There's like, that's why I was kind of laughing when you started saying that. I was laughing at myself because I was like, well, because I mean, you start going down these rabbit holes, I guess is lack of a better term. And you go, oh, well, okay, that kind of tracks and that tracks and that tracks. So cloud seeding, what's the stretch between that and chemtrails? And
Right.
Is it the same thing anyway? And the other thing that I think is so interesting, you alluded to this earlier. So Bayer Monsanto creates glyphosate, which is the horrible herbicide, pesticide, whichever one it is, or both, that doesn't matter, which poisons our crops, which is why you have to buy organic. And let's hope that the Monsanto or the glyphosate hasn't been sprayed on the crop row of food right next to it. And it's just going to carry over into organic anyway. But Bayer Monsanto. So Bayer, obviously, pharmaceutical company, Monsanto. So they'll poison you with glyphosate and then they'll have you come over and buy their pharmaceutical products to cure the sickness that they caused in the first place. They make money coming and going. It doesn't matter. It does not matter.
It's an incredible business model. It is
a beautiful, it's quite elegant, actually.
It is, yeah. It's evil genius.
But yeah, I was actually very enthusiastic to have even those heavy metals be discussed. So again, I was coming from this where, to my mind, and having been part of the autism conversation for 30 years now, and then also in my journey with this information, Andy Wakefield comes out with all this information, just saying MMR, his research found, or he analyzed some research that found that if at least you move it from giving it to babies at 18 months, move it to like 4 years, that alone would help decrease the adverse events, including autism. And he was a gastro gut doctor.
He was, yeah.
He didn't want to get dragged into this.
No.
Like Bobby, he wasn't even looking for this fight, but moms kept coming to him. Like, I think there's a gut relationship, which we know that neurotransmitters are in our guts as well. So it's part of the spinal cord, essentially. So it's all neurological to some degree. I'm probably not saying this very well.
No, you're right. And it's not just so many of our neurotransmitters, most of our immune systems in our gut as well. Like it's our gut health is incredibly important, and things that alter it, like glyphosate or like vaccines or like lack of bifidobacteria, that sort of thing. Like we have no idea what the long-term consequences are going to be. We have no idea what a lot of the short-term consequences are going to be because they haven't even done those studies. And I want to call that out really quick because we are forced to accept this framework as dissidents where they demand that we provide the proof that something is dangerous. And we just have to reject that outright. And we have to say, no, that's not how this works. You have to show us that you have done your due diligence and done a robust, thorough, and transparent job to show us that this product is safe. It's not our job to prove to you that it's dangerous. How about you show us that you've done at least a little bit of work looking into its safety? But yeah, we're forced to kind of be on the defensive right off the bat. Like, well, where's your study that shows that Tylenol is dangerous? Or where's your study that shows that vaccines are dangerous? Like, no, that is not the correct starting point. The correct starting point is, have you done even just a cursory attempt to show that vaccines are safe? Oh, you did a 3-day safety study where you monitored people for 72 hours after their injection for side effects. And now you're saying, like, well, where's your proof it's dangerous? We have to reject that framework outright.
I appreciate that. We absolutely do. We need to come from the proper posture and put the onus on the appropriate party. And I'm thinking about too, how when Wakefield came out with that, even just suggesting bumping it back, and then Trump, in again, a more clunky manner, was talking about, he was trying to say, pull apart, for example, MMR, measles, mumps, rubella should not all be given in the same shot. And that is also a theory. I mean, I'm just so anti-vax at this point, doesn't matter. But for someone who did want to get one of those, you cannot get just one. If you're like, I've never heard of anyone getting mumps in the last 100 years, although I think I actually got it when I was a kid, whatever. And I'm sure I had the MMR. But to that point, while we're on that, let's also talk, because for someone who's not familiar with the insane number that we're talking about, thanks to the 1986 act that passed, that caused us as American citizens, we cannot sue a pharmaceutical corporation if their product, their vaccine gets on the childhood schedule, which again, to connect the dots for someone who's not steeped in this, though that CDC schedule is used as the recommendation for most public schools in the country, meaning your child has to, in order to get their free taxpayer, you paid for it, education, they have to be up to date with their vaccines. And again, just as I alluded to, when I was little, I think we got smallpox, polio, MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, and that was about it, maybe something else. So from 0 to 18, maybe 7 shots total, a couple boosters here and there. Now, if you do everything, including pregnancy, if your mom is compliant with her shots, which just terrifies me, even just saying it, you will be up to, from 0 to 18, from in utero to 18, you will be up to 90 plus shots because you cannot sue them. What motivation does a pharmaceutical company, which are known criminals, known felons, what motivation do they have to actually give you a safe product when you cannot sue them if your child becomes autistic miraculously one day afterwards? They have zero accountability. And should you be an angry parent and you want to go and get some sort of justice for this, guess who pays for it? The vaccine, the VAERS report. You can put in a VAERS report if you get so lucky, which probably not, but if you get so lucky to be able to get some compensation, and I don't know how many millions of dollars you can pay a parent and say, well, I guess, oopsies, your child has autism, but here's a couple mil. It's taxpayer money anyway. Like, you're not even getting the money from the stupid corporation. Oh, okay. Yeah. Take it.
This whole system is the perfect example of how the scope of this problem is not merely that sometimes pharma companies are a little bit greedy and we kind of expect them to fudge the numbers on efficacy a little bit and maybe even safety, although that's pretty dark territory. Like that's wishful thinking that's only the scope of this problem. It's actually much, much darker than that. It's the fact that these pharma companies will gladly allow people to die for profit, as they have been convicted of over and over and over. And our legislative system lets them get away with it. They have completely captured our legislative system, and our judicial system lets them completely get away with it. It has been completely incompetent at holding people accountable, even when they have piles of bodies in the tens of thousands. Nobody goes to prison. So it's a good example of how it's not just these bad actors at pharmaceutical companies. We also have massive systemic rot within our legislature, our judicial system, and our federal regulators. Obviously, the FDA, CDC, NIH have all been either impotent or complicit in all of this. And it really shines a light on the scope of the problem, and vaccines are the perfect example to give, but it does extend far beyond vaccines as well.
Well, and it's as you mentioned a moment ago, we live in a capitalist, quote unquote, I'm going to adjust that term in a moment, but sometimes people, it's just greedy corporations, big corporations being greedy like they always are. Yeah, we do recognize that that's part of the system, but we've left capitalism as we understand it from old school Adam Smith economists or whoever. That's not my field, but we're now corporatists. We're in a corporatism, which is the complete, as you said, capture by corporations of our government officials to where they do not represent us. We are not their constituents. Pharma is their constituent. I mean, I've likened it to when growing up, we always thought about South America, Central America, the drug cartels ran the entire government. I'm like, same. That is what is happening here. There's no daylight. There's literally no daylight. That's why you have someone like Cassidy getting up there trying to keep Bobby Kennedy from being confirmed, because he's a doctor and he's so bought and paid for by his own profession. Because let's mention another little known fact. Pediatricians will kick kids out of their practice if the parents want to delay and do a delayed schedule of vaccines, or opt not to vaccinate at all their children, because they get money from the pharmaceutical companies to keep the kids on the schedule. And it's thousands of dollars. It can be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. They need, and to your point earlier, and it sounds so cynical and so conspiratorial, but we got so healthy. And all these vaccines were getting credit for getting rid of measles. That was not what got rid of measles. If you look at the graphs, measles are going down, plummeting cases in America. A couple years after, they're like basically at zero, literally a couple hundred cases in the entire United States. They come out with the vaccine, give the vaccine credit. It wasn't the vaccine. It was improved nutrition. It was improved hygiene. It was refrigeration of food. All these, we're not living on top of each other in tenement houses and people dumping feces out into the street below. And so we're giving credit to the vaccine for what was happening anyway. And now you've got all this credit, and then the basically kids are getting too healthy. So we have to get them sick. So let's give them vaccines, which will get them sick. And now they've got the allergies and they'll need an EpiPen. And now they've got seizures. So they're going to have to something for that. And now they've got, people do not connect the dots. And because there's an active, and again, this sounds conspiratorial, but there are factions of society that do not want us to know what's actually going on. And that's why a conversation, whenever we talk, to me, I'm so passionate about it, because I'm just trying to help people see things that if they're busy, they're paying their bills, they're taking people don't have time to go deep into this unless they've had an entire career ideology and philosophy change like you have, to where you've seen where you entered your profession as a psychiatric nurse, and now you're 180. And like you said, part of the dissident community. So speak to that a little bit, just about where we are as far as the credit that's given and the financial incentives and whatever you want to respond to. There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. No, you're right, though. And it's gotten massively complex and paralyzing, because it used to be, I used to feel like I could trust the health authorities, and now I know I can't. Now I know I have to do my own research. But as I try and do that, as I try and do my own research, we did an episode on Nurses Out Loud recently where we looked at the issue of paper mills, and it has exploded so exponentially over the last few years. We're now at a point where there are hundreds of thousands of papers published every year that are basically garbage, that the authors either plagiarize or use AI to write their paper. They either steal or Photoshop their graphs. They fabricate their data. And it's gotten so sophisticated, and there are so many legit appearing journals that publish this garbage, and then you train up AI on the garbage. It is so impossible to make sense out of any of this. This system of evidence-based practice has it's completely broken at this point. And it's this, at the corporate level, it's we know that these corporations are going to commit research fraud for profit. They've been doing that for decades and decades. But we also have this new issue of, in academia, it's publish or perish. And
Yes.
especially in China and India, and of course in the US now, we have this issue where we have these paper mills just crank out these papers and then sell them to academics who need to be published in order for their career to progress. And one of the systems that they put in place to combat this is called PubPeer, which basically crowdsources the peer review process, which is a fantastic idea to try and hold some of these fraudulent publishers to account. But unfortunately, that system has been hijacked as well, to the point where there are what are essentially mercenary groups who will take money. It costs about $5,000 to have a paper you don't like that threatens your profits or your career excoriated on PubMed by these mercenary groups of so-called editors. So it's completely broken, and RFK, continuously talks about returning to gold standard science, and I don't know how that happens, but it can't come soon enough, because the situation now is the amount of fraud, just the sheer quantity of it, and then the sophistication of it it's just overwhelming, and so you have some people who will just adopt this mindset of like, that's too much for me, so I'm just going to believe the authorities. And and now they're in that quandary where the new authorities say things that they don't believe in, so they're just like, well, I guess I'll trust the AAP, whatever big physician organization is out there that's completely owned and run by pharma. They just transfer their trust over to them, and I don't understand what it takes to get the blinders to come off at this point. I mean, it's not a fun journey, but I don't know, Karen. So many people are just aghast at the things RFK is doing and the things that are being said, and I don't get it, because it's like, okay, let's say you think he's wrong. What is it then? Because you can't hide the bodies. You can't hide the fact that our rates of chronic illness, especially amongst children, are skyrocketing. Our life expectancy is going down. So, okay, if it's not these things, what do you think it is?
Yeah.
What's your theory? What's your hypothesis? Like, if we're wrong, what's your theory?
Exactly. And why make it political? Like these women who are pregnant women, I saw something, I don't know if it's true or not, who knows, online world, but some pregnant woman was having liver failure because she was chugging Tylenol. Like, also, why make it, Kennedy is still a Democrat. My goodness, he is Democrat royalty. You cannot have a more Democrat name than Kennedy. Why make this political? Our children are suffering. If you've ever been in the presence of a profoundly autistic child, it is excruciating. These children are banging their heads against the wall. They are 18 years old in diapers and nonverbal and having rages, tantrums like a 2-year-old. You don't care for that family because you want to make it political? It infuriates me. And stop with the normalizing autism awareness. I'm so sick of it. Neurodiversity. Stop normalizing profound damage of babies who were totally normal and had light in their eyes and were speaking, and then 18 months plummet into hell. It is hell for parents. And they go hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt trying to carpet bomb some therapies. And there's so little support for them. So for you thinking you're taking this noble stance because you hate Trump and he's trying to save babies, check yourself. What is your problem? You are seriously deranged. That felt good.
They are deranged, and I want to speak to that particular part of it because, as people know, I'm a psych nurse, so I have been in the gender weeds for, I mean, we're closing in on a decade here. So there is no greater extraordinary claim than this child was born in the wrong body and we need to treat them with scalpels and hormones. It reminds me of that old Carl Sagan quote from, I think it was the late 70s, when there was all this talk about Bermuda Triangle and UFOs and Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and all that. And he said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. There is no more extraordinary claim than we need to use these life-altering, permanent chemicals on a child and maybe do some surgeries as well because they are confused about their gender. We better have just incredible evidence base for that in order to go down that road and start doing it to tens of thousands of children, which we have done. And like I said, I've been deep in the weeds on this, and this is not a case of the science is complex. We have a giant stack of papers on this side that say it's a good idea, but I have a giant stack of papers on this side that says it's a bad idea. When you look at the research put forward by the biggest advocates who are doing this, the people at the WPATH or people like Joanna Olson Kennedy at the Los Angeles Children's Hospital, their research from the people who are doing it, from the people who are setting the national guidelines, completely undermines the practice in and of itself. We don't have this issue where some of the research is good, some of the research is bad. The research is all bad. In fact, Joanna Olson Kennedy, I don't know if we talked about this before, Karen, but she got about $9 million of our taxpayer money to do a long-term study on whether or not medically transitioning children was good for their mental health. And then she refused to release it. Yeah. She wouldn't release it. It took a couple years when it was finally force released. She put in the conclusions like, and obviously gender affirming care is good. But when you actually looked at her data, depression did not get better. Anxiety did not get better. Suicidality did not get better. So we have this system where we have been telling all these parents, would you rather have a dead son or a living daughter, and manipulating them like that. And the people who are doing this, the people who are the biggest zealots about it, their own evidence doesn't support what they're doing. And we know that all these hormones that are given to kids like Lupron, which is the so-called puberty blocker. This is a chemotherapy drug that is FDA approved to give to men with prostate cancer, not approved at all to give to children outside of children with precocious puberty, which is like when you start going into puberty when you're 6 years old, 8 years old, that sort of thing, because it completely nukes your hormones and causes lifelong issues like osteoporosis, like infertility, like sexual dysfunction. And that's just the start. That's just the start down the path. We haven't even gotten to the cross-sex hormones or the scalpels yet. And in her study, they were doing this to kids who were 8 years old, Karen, 8 years old. And I'm starting to think of it as a cult, as a religious belief, because I think of my journey where it's like I have changed my mind on so many things. Like I used to call people anti-vaxxer. I used to have a completely different opinion about psych meds. I would tell people this is a medication that fixes a chemical imbalance. It's causing your depression, blah, blah, blah. People put evidence in front of me that challenged those beliefs. And then I changed my belief. And I have for so long thought that we could bring other people along, the people who believe in transitioning children, like, well, if we just get the evidence in front of them, we can show them that this is actually doing a lot of harm and that the evidence supporting this practice isn't there. But honestly, I've gotten to the point where I feel like these people are lost. Like I don't know where to go with it at this point, because it does seem like cult-like behavior where it doesn't matter what evidence you put in front of them. You put their own evidence, like the evidence of the people doing this, in front of someone that believes in that cult, and it doesn't change their opinion at all. So it's become this. I'm starting to see it more and more as a cult of child sacrifice, and it is not evidence-based at all. And the medical professional in me who still believes in evidence-based practice and all that, I don't know how so many of my peers have gotten to this point where the evidence doesn't matter to them. It's the belief that matters to them. It's being part of the right team that matters to them, even when the lives of children are at stake. I don't get it, Karen.
It's baffling. It's baffling because I mean, as you spoke to, so a study's conducted, the data show what they show. And then in conclusion, the author of the paper still wants to write it up as if, yep, my hypothesis was confirmed. So, and most people aren't going to read the methods and the results because there's like weird statistic things. And so they're just going to take the abstract and take the conclusion and go, okay. So that's why everything is junk science now. Everything is junk science. I mean, we knew we couldn't trust it. Was it the Lancet that came out early in COVID and trying to discredit, I don't know who it was, but the Great Barrington Declaration. There was something where the Lancet came out with all these supposed experts in the field to say, I don't know if it was the Wuhan versus the wet market, blah, blah, blah. I knew that was crud then. And as far as these associations, like American Pediatrics, they're the ones who recently came out. Obesity is a disease. Your kid can't help it. Just give them Ozempic. So I'm like, you people are dead to me. You are so clearly captured. It is sickening that you literally do not want to help children. Stop saying you do. These people who are trying to get me to call you a different pronoun, stop it. Every cell in your body, in your nucleus, except for red blood cells, I believe, has either an XX or an XY. That is science. You cannot change that with hormones. You cannot change that with cutting off body parts. Stop it. You're not going to make me delusional just because you are. And as a psychologist, I take issue with that. They're going to try to change. I'm dead naming you or I'm misgendering you. No, you have a delusion. And I am very sorry that you're in distress. I'm sure you are in distress, more distress because people keep affirming your delusion. You are not going to invite me into your circus and you cannot make me. And that does not make me a bad person for sticking on team reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like your point about, okay, if this organization burns your trust, just discard them and don't listen to them
I'm done with them.
anymore. You're done with them. You move on. You try and find sources that you can actually trust. Even when they're wrong, sometimes if they will acknowledge what they got wrong in the past, that to me earns a lot of credibility. And that kind of brings us back to not just the gender stuff, but like, I do not understand, Karen, the people who still believe and take health advice from the same people who told them Biden is sharp as a tack. What does it take to burn your trust, if not that? So they believed that Biden was sharp as a tack despite the evidence in front of their own eyes. They believed when they were told that COVID vaccines prevent transmission, and then they got 8 boosters and have gotten more COVID than anyone. They believe that men can get pregnant, and they continue to believe the people who are telling them that or they say like, well, I'm not a biologist, so I don't know whether or not men can get pregnant. I don't have the authority to weigh in on that. I need to leave that to the health authorities. They believe that, COVID must have come from a bat that sneezed on a pangolin in a Chinese wet market. And it definitely couldn't have come from their hero, Anthony Fauci, in his position at the NIH, where he was authorizing grants to do gain of function research with Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and some of it went to Peter Daszak and his group EcoHealth Alliance, where they specifically picked the Wuhan Institute of Virology because they had less stringent safety protocols over there. And just because Anthony Fauci approved grants where they were trying to take a coronavirus and add a spike protein to it with a humanized furin cleavage site, like, pay no attention to that. It was definitely the bat that sneezed on a pangolin. Like, what does it take for these people to stop listening to the people who are telling them these egregious lies?
Well, yeah. I mean, so many things from that. I mean, when is the American Heart Association going to admit that it wasn't sugar and that they told us to use these seed oil, vegetable oil crap instead of butter and ghee and beef tallow? When are they going to acknowledge that?
Yeah, they still put out these heart-healthy recipes that are like, number one ingredient, sugar. Okay.
Right.
The American Diabetes Association does the same thing. They put out these, here's your my plate for if you have diabetes. And it's like 80% carbs on there. Like, oh, okay. Yeah, you guys are doing, again, this is a great business model. Tell people with diabetes to eat all the carbs and sugar they want. Fantastic business model.
Well, right. It used to be called sugar diabetes. when I was a child, when I was real little. And then it was type 2. Type 2 sounds better, doesn't it? Not called sugar diabetes anymore because you eat too much sugar and carbs.
Well, it's obviously genetic, Karen.
Oh, of course it is. Just your screwed up genes.
It's your fault. It's your right. Genes, obviously. Yeah.
But pulling through the autism link, again, you brought up the whole gender, I don't even know, like whatever it is.
Sorry to derail into that topic, no, but it is the lens through which I see their reaction to autism. It's you see the same mindset.
And there are a disproportionate, if the sources I've trust are correct, there's a disproportionate number of kids who believe that they need to transition who are autistic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
So the cult needs autistic kids to keep their movement going.
They do.
I mean, and now I'm like, well, so of course they're going to be on the side of jabbing their children. I mean, let's get an autistic kid so we can have the autistic kid think he's a boy or a girl and keep the whole movement strong. I mean, I think another element that we're really speaking to, but just to kind of just focus on it, is this lack of critical thinking, Dave. And I'm starting to believe, I think partly it's because we've been so polarized. And so to your point, if I'm on Team Biden, I'm not going to acknowledge, I'm not going to believe my eyes when I see what I see. I'll just say that was, a cheap fake, I think is what Karine Jean-Pierre called it. Okay, so I'm on Team Biden, which was also strange because Operation Warp Speed was under Trump, but then Team Biden took over and it was just so confusing. If I'm on Team Biden, then anything that comes out of Orange Man Bad's mouth, I will immediately dismiss, and not only dismiss, I will do the exact opposite in spades. Okay, so we've got that. When you go to that polarized thinking, as if you have to stand firm on your team, whereas, and again, right now, I love that we have a team of rivals in the administration. I love that Tulsi Gabbard was a lifelong Democrat. And now she, like, to your point, you were a lifelong psychiatric nurse who believed in pharma because you have to correct these chemical imbalances. I love someone who's changed their mind. Some of my favorite voices right now, the Weinsteins, who evolutionary biologists. I'm a devout Christian. They're evolutionary biologists. We should have nothing in common. And yet they were some of the shining lights during COVID. I remembered like waiting for their podcast to come out so I could be like, okay, a voice of reason. Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald. These are people who have been darlings of the left who've been kicked out because they weren't playing by the rules now. You switched jerseys. No, we didn't switch jerseys. We remained grounded in critical thinking, logic and reason, evidence-based to the extent we can trust the evidence that's presented to us. We're still trying to grapple through that because of all these institutions and authorities that we can no longer trust. Those of us on team critical thinking, we have moved to these positions we didn't ever think we would be in. And we have a big tent over here and we welcome everyone. I'm very much concerned that so much of this polarization, because of the politicalization of all these issues, which should not be politicized. And then also, let me give you an example that's related to the vaccines again. So my friend's daughter is pregnant and she sent me a screenshot that her daughter sent her, which is from one of these pregnancy apps. And the pregnancy app at like when the baby's, 5 months in utero, she sends us to her mom, hey, are you and dad caught up with your whooping cough, your Tdap? Yeah, tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. That's a Tdap, or a DTaP if it's for the kids. But a Tdap is for the adults. And she's like, and she and I had this conversation because Dan is a recent grandfather and had the same conversation with his son and his wife. And so the app tells you to tell your parents, and I kid you not, I should read it verbatim, but I'll give you the gist. The screenshot said, it's time to ask your friends and family members if they're up to date on their Tdap because we want to protect the baby, create the bubble, the pertussis bubble, the whooping cough bubble, to keep that nasty whooping cough away from your infant. So, and it literally said, Dave, verbatim. Now, some of your older family members might push back on this because they'll say, well, we didn't need to do that in our day. And it says, stand firm. This is important. Okay. Critical thinking. I want to ask these pregnant women, you got this free app on your phone. Do you think it was free to program that app? Do you think it's free to distribute that app? Who is paying for that app, young girl? Who's going to force her mother to get a shot that her mother doesn't need, that she can't just get the pertussis, by the way. She has to get the tetanus and the diphtheria looped in. And you're going to put division in a family right now. A mother who can't wait to hold her grandbaby is not going to be able to hold her grandbaby for who knows how many months unless she gets this pharmaceutical product in her, which she does not need. But you've terrified the young woman. The young woman, sadly, because these kids, I'm not saying these kids, I shouldn't say that, but many people are not thinking critically. Who paid for that app? My guess is a pharmaceutical corporation. No one is connecting the dots, Dave. It's so infuriating. I'm not calm, but calm down. Stop believing blindly these sources that are not trustworthy. They've demonstrated that they are not trustworthy. Think critically, but they don't. They're like, oh, the app said it. Here, mom, get the Tdap.
Yeah, it reminds me of an article I just read last week in Stat News. Stat News is basically a propaganda wing of pharma. And the title of the article is The Coming Fragmentation of Vaccination Social Order. Stat News is filled with people who just despise RFK Jr. and undermine him at every turn. They are complete pharma shills. And what they're talking about is how, let me see. As the system breaks apart, meaning what RFK Jr. is doing as head of HHS and Marty McCary and Jay Bhattacharya, as the system breaks apart, families and institutions will face new responsibilities. The current administration has devastated FEMA's ability to respond to natural disasters, leading families in disaster-prone areas to stock up on extra emergency supplies. Now, families and other groups need similar strategic thinking to protect their communities when federal and state governments abandoned immunization promotion. And they go on to talk about how, parents, because they love their children so much, are going to have to make some hard decisions about whether or not they should even allow grandparents to see their children. This is what the pharma shills are spreading out there right now. They are going so hard in the paint to protect their liability-free product that they are encouraging parents to sever their relationship with their child's grandparents. It is so detestable. Like, just when you think these people couldn't reach new levels of evil just from the piles of tens of thousands of bodies that they've racked up over the decades, they're just overtly willing to break families apart over sales of their product. Like, I don't know. I think a lot of the spiritual awakening that's happening in this country right now isn't because people are seeing the good. It's because they're seeing like true evil afoot in the world, and this is a perfect example of it.
Well, it's a great example. It's divisive. It is tearing apart family bonds. It's literally like, oh, I trust my app more than my mother. I trust my app more than my grandmother. And they're saying to the young lady, you can't trust those older family members. I don't know. The older family members actually raised you so that you are now 28 years old and pregnant. Like, they did something right because the generation, they continue to procreate and raise healthy humans, you of which are one. I mean, like, what?
Right.
What
they still have their fertility, so they weren't transitioned as minors, obviously.
Right. But if the app told them to transition, maybe they just go ahead and do that. I just get frustrated with and it's hard not to. Again, as a Christian, it's hard for me not to see this is part of the plan, that technology comes in, pharmacology comes in and divides us.
Yeah.
Takes us away from our humanity. I mean, we saw that in COVID in spades. Well, let's let this product divide you from your family member. You can't even see them at Thanksgiving. You better only have 6 people over and they better all be vaccinated and they better be in your bubble. It's terrifying and people buy into it, but it's not us. We're the ones going, I mean, Thanksgiving, I'm like, come one, come all. I don't care if you're vaccinated or not. Obviously, I would prefer you not be vaccinated because I was terrified of that product, still am. And I'm just wondering if some of these we've bombarded our system with so many toxins, as you said, from the pesticides, from goodness, who knows, the radiation in the air, including the vaccines. I mean, I'm to the point I wouldn't even, if I was trying to travel to a third world country to do a mission trip or something, I wouldn't take a vaccine at this point. I would just be like, I can't go if you're going to force me to. I don't care. I don't care. I'm tired of being coerced. But I'm just wondering if we've lost some critical thinking. I don't, or maybe it's the screens. I don't know. I just don't see people thinking through the way that, and we don't have debate anymore the way that we did when we were, I mean, look at Charlie Kirk gets killed because he gets murdered because he wanted to debate.
Yeah.
In our day, you had debate in high school, you debate teams, and you couldn't just go, I feel this. It was just, you had to present an argument. You had to anticipate the counter argument, the rebuttal, and then be prepared with another bullet point beneath your initial premise, and then be ready for their counter argument. And it was so sophisticated in our argumentation. We've lost that to our detriment, because when we lose that, we are totally vulnerable to being manipulated, which we see all around us.
I agree. And I'm glad you kind of laid out team critical thinking, because that's definitely something that has stood out to me of late too. When you look at people on the progressive left, they say that Trump followers are part of a cult and that they do not question their messiah. And that could not be further from the truth. It is such an absolute diverse ragtag group of people who are conservatives and libertarians that disagree publicly and debate things publicly all the time. Like, COVID vaccines are a perfect example. Like, this is something where Trump has been booed by Republicans when he starts talking about COVID vaccines, and they pretend it's a cult. When you look at issues like H-1B visas, or you look at Pam Bondi, for example, like, Trump's base constantly gives him negative feedback about things he's doing and argue with each other over things like free speech and Israel and all these things. It's like there's constant debate. And on the other side, did anybody on the progressive left ever say, boy, Joe Biden seems to be having some cognitive decline? Like, they are the ones that have this incredible cult-like behavior where they do not question authority. They get in line. They have the blinders on. They don't challenge anything so far as I can see. And then they project onto conservatives that they are the ones who are cult-like, who are following some sort of messiah, where it's confession through projection is what it is. And
yes.
I'm glad you brought up Charlie Kirk too, because that's something that's certainly been weighing heavily on us in my household and with my friends. I can't tell you how many people reached out and said, like, I don't know what exactly, but this is incredibly heavy and it feels like the world changed. And the only thing I can compare it to from my lifetime is 9/11. You know, it happened the day before the anniversary, but it made me think back, and that might sound hyperbolic or you know, I can definitely see people saying, like, how can you possibly compare the assassination of one man to the thousands of people that died on 9/11? And I'm not trying to equate them. What I'm just trying to say is it feels like our country has changed. Like, something happened on that day that has changed our country forever. And what part of that was not just from the assassination itself, Karen, it was also from seeing people's responses to it. It was from seeing all these people respond with absolute glee and joy. And one of my more liberal friends told me, like, Dave, that is just the algorithm feeding people hate. And he's right to an extent, because the algorithms do that. They thrive on hatred. They thrive on upsetting people. But at the same time, I saw it from people in the local community here. I saw it from people that I used to work with. I saw it from some of my own family members. It is not just the algorithm driving this reaction. There was an incredible number of people who didn't just feel that when they heard that he died, they felt empowered to post about it, to post that they were glad that he was dead. They posted that they wish he had been tortured before he died. They posted that that is something that we need more of in this country. And it's really got me black-pilled lately, because I feel like the divide between red and blue has gotten so out of control. I don't know the path forward towards reconciliation. And we are at such a dangerous point in time in our society right now, where I really do believe that Western civilization itself is at stake. And we have three very distinct powers that want to destroy our entire civilization. One of them is the kind of postmodern Marxist critical race theory, critical gender theory. You know, we've talked a lot about that this episode. Like they are very upfront about it. Like, Western civilization is built on a white patriarchy and it needs to be dismantled. Like, that is their goal. And that is a whole lot of people in our schools, in our institutions of higher education, in our government. They believe that. And we also have the globalists, the people who want us all to have a digital vaccine passport, who want us to have digital currency so that they can turn off our bank accounts with the flip of a switch if they so choose. The people who say, you know, from the World Economic Forum, who are, again, very upfront with what they want. They want 15-minute cities. They want us to own nothing and be happy. They talk about these things publicly. And then the third one, the other one working to undermine our entire civilization, is Islamic fundamentalists. They want to implement Sharia law throughout the West. And again, this is not something that's conspiratorial. They are very upfront. And when you look at what's going on in a lot of places in Europe and the UK along these lines, like, wow, you know, I don't know, Karen, if you've looked into the rape gang crisis in the UK at all, but there's horrific things going back decades over in the UK involving tens of thousands of young white girls who were targeted because they were young and white, who were raped by these, most of them Pakistani gangs over in the UK. And then the police would cover it up and judges would say, well, you know, we have to respect diversity of cultures. And so then these people end up back on the streets. And it's an insane scandal over there. And, you know, we've imported so many people into Western countries that do not want to assimilate, that do not uphold our values. And it really feels like we're on the brink. We have these three very profound and powerful forces that are quite literally, in my opinion, trying to destroy Western civilization. And we've also are incredibly weak right now because we don't have unity. Like the divide between red and blue right now is so profound and so visceral and so charged and so heated and so full of emotion that we're kind of and it's not that these issues aren't important, like issues like abortion, issues like transgender care, issues like free speech, or, you know, it's not that those aren't important, but they are distracting us from what are true existential threats to our entire way of living.
And I do think, and then the stuff you're talking, is that Tommy Robinson's work, right? Wasn't he thrown into?
Tommy Robinson has been a big outspoken voice in the UK. Yeah, the UK arrested 12,000 people last year for online posts, Karen.
I mean, and that's what we always hear, how precious our First Amendment is. And that even in, I mean, the UK, obviously that's our entire system is based on their system of government. And they somehow forgot about having a First Amendment of whatever the equivalents would be over there. Because I've heard that. So they don't have free speech. They can't speak their mind. They're considered, and hate speech. Who came up with that term? That was clever. It's real clever. Very clever. Because now people say, well, hate speech. Right. Even Pam Bondi, and she's getting told to stop with that nonsense.
You know, and that's a great example of how, like, we are the party of debate, and we are a ragtag group of diverse people who are willing to actually
Yes.
like speak up when we see these true core values that we need to uphold being challenged.
Yeah. We hold him to account. That's what's funny about, like, people on the left still think of themselves, liberals, leftists, whatever, they still think of themselves as like fighting the powers that be. I'm like, you literally are the establishment.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
You are the The reason we disagree is because we've gone to independent media. We don't trust Rachel Maddow. We don't trust all these whoever. I don't even watch those programs. These CNN, MSNBC.
Right.
We don't trust them. And getting to the point about Biden and his cognitive decline, I don't know that they saw what we saw. I think that because it wasn't going to be on Rachel Maddow's show, it wasn't going to be on some CNN news program. So we're also being exposed to different information and then making our conclusions and assessments of what's going on, which furthers the divide. And we just trust different sources. Like my friends on the left would totally trust Rachel Maddow. I would not trust her. They still think that and I guess now that Trump's in charge, you could say that's the establishment, but not really, to your point. Who we have in charge right now, they're still fighting all the deep state and the bureaucrats that have been there for 100 years and want to keep business as usual. So even though we are technically in charge, we're still having to fight the establishment.
Oh, the establishment is still completely in charge, and it is not Trump. I mean, look at how many executive orders Trump has had to do instead of having things passed through Congress. None of his agenda has been passed through Congress. He's having to do everything through executive order. RFK too, like trying to do his work. You have Republicans like Bill Cassidy from Louisiana who are giant obstacles to the MAHA agenda because he's bought and paid for by pharmaceutical companies. And that is the definition of establishment power. That's also the definition of the deep state. It's these permanently entrenched bureaucrats who are unelected and are in Washington forever and wield incredible power. And it doesn't really matter what new administration comes in. They're the ones who are calling the shots.
Right. Yeah. And so to the point you made about the division, I mean, I think you're three very, I don't want to give them power, but they are scary forces at work. They do benefit when we are divided. And half the country really they're ready for the Marxist takeover. They're good with it. They framed us as Christian nationalists for wanting to have our country remain founded in the Judeo-Christian principles on which it was founded. And for me to be a Christian and to love my country and not want an open border where people can come over and take jobs from Americans because they'll work for half as much. I mean, none of this benefits my country. And then I'm called a Christian nationalist. Like that's a pejorative because I am a Christian. I love the values on which this country was founded. And I do believe that we're allowed to have a sovereign nation. That makes me a bad person. So they're weaponizing the language. Like I said earlier, hate speech. That's a phony term made up to then take control of my First Amendment right.
Yeah, exactly.
All over the place.
Yeah, exactly. Karen, you're sounding pretty racist right now. I think we're going to have to shut off your bank accounts and revoke your ability to travel outside your homes.
Right. I mean, but that's exactly right. Because look what they did. They absolutely shut down the bank accounts of anyone who was for the Freedom Convoy, the Canadian truckers. They called them racist Nazis. Where was that? Most of them had been vaccinated against COVID. They just were like, I sit in the cab of a truck all day. I don't need to be vaccinated. So if my fellow trucker doesn't want to get vaccinated, I'm here for it. And somehow, with absolutely no rationale whatsoever, no evidence of any kind of racism involved in this movement, they were racist. They were Nazis. You can just say anything with
you can just say anything. And they say things that don't hold up to even the most mild amount of scrutiny. Like when they call people who are vaccine injured anti-vaxxers. Like this person literally rolled up their sleeve for the vaccine and they were injured. So now you're just dismissing them with a pejorative anti-vaxxer. Like, do you not see the insanity in what you're saying? But it's just, I don't know. It's just, ignorance is bliss, I guess, or it's a way to go through life believing you have the moral and intellectual high ground by not allowing these cult-like belief systems to be challenged.
Well, and bringing it back to vaccines, and I think it is ignorance is bliss, but it's also a moral inversion. So just as we wrap up, Dave, we can punctuate with the other news of the day, the whole Jimmy Kimmel debacle. He was canceled for 5 days. He had the right free speech. Well, okay, he's on publicly funded airways, so there's that. It's a network broadcast as opposed to a cable show. So there's some difference there as far as the government, because it's there are airwaves, taxpayer funded airwaves. So we do have something we can say, which does not infringe upon his free speech. But set that aside. To your point, talking about vaccine injured, we know for a fact that the Biden administration pressured the social media platforms to take down groups of people trying to find each other. Like, oh my gosh, I have an autoimmune disease now, thanks to the COVID vaccine. People are trying to find each other using Facebook, for example, trying to find support because they're being gaslit by their doctors. They are looking for support and comfort and validation that I'm not crazy. And then Biden's like, we don't want to have anything that is anything against the COVID vaccine, pressuring Zuckerberg and others to pull down Twitter accounts, which Google has just this week reinstated some accounts that were canceled 5 years ago due to the doctors who were pushing up back against the vaccine, the COVID vaccine.
They said they deleted 1 million videos.
That's insane. And yet they want to cry about Jimmy Kimmel losing 5 days on the air. My point is, I'm so tired of the left. We're so tolerant. We're so accepting. We're so loving. You are not. You literally wanted people who are suffering because they did the right thing. They rolled up their sleeve. Now, to your point, you're calling them anti-vaxxers. You're denying them the ability to find support and community with other people who've been injured. You think that's loving because you want to make sure that the vaccination campaign doesn't have any detractors or dissidents? That is cruel. So stop positioning yourself as the loving, tolerant ones. You are cruel. I do agree you're in a cult, and it is terrifying because, to your point, we're fighting these three factions and it's only one half of the country that's actually fighting them. The rest are lockstep with these globalist ideation, with the open borders, with it doesn't matter. And you're a Christian nationalist if you have anything to say about it.
Yeah, and that's why, these are such dark times we're in right now, and it's hard to find the light with where all of this is going.
Yeah.
I don't know, Karen. I don't know.
Well, we're going to do another episode with Elliot, and we'll let him do his pastor thing and show us that there is still light and hope in the darkness, because it does feel very dire. It really does. But to me, and that's why I'm so thankful that you are always willing to join us on the program, because to me, right here, this was my group therapy. You and I just going back and forth with me. I respect and admire your intellect so much. Again, I respect people who are willing to change their minds and own it and go, this is what I thought. I was trained to believe this. My education taught me this. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was presented with evidence that was contradictory. I wrestled with that and then came out on the side of truth. And you could have easily been like, no, that's not what we do. Psychiatric nurses, we remain medical model. And I admire that so much. So these are the folks with whom I want to have conversations, because I trust those voices that are willing to go, like I said, like the Weinsteins, like Rescue the Republic a year ago was full. I mean, it looked like a Trump rally, and there were MAGA hats. Of course there were, but there were Maha hats because Kennedy was there, Ron Johnson. I mean, we had, it was, like you said, a ragtag team of rivals. Those are my people. We will continue to know we're not alone. Conversations like what we just had will let anyone in the love and life community know they are not alone as well. And thanks again for joining me today and for continuing to spread the word.
It is very therapeutic to talk to somebody who gets it. Yeah. So I hope listening to conversations like this is also validating and helpful for people.
Yep. I do think it is. I know it is for me personally. And let everyone know where to find your podcast that you and your other dissident nurses have come up with.
Oh, so I'm a regular host on Nurses Out Loud. So you can go to americaoutloud.news or just look for Nurses Out Loud in whatever your preferred podcast app is.
That's fantastic, because McCullough's podcast is on America Out Loud.
He is. And Mary Talley Bowden, Peter Bregan. They have a lot of really fantastic people exactly like you described, the people who have changed their minds about things.
Yep.
And that is something that absolutely draws me in is when
Yes.
somebody has been willing to publicly acknowledge that they were wrong about something and change their mind. And the Weinsteins are the perfect example of that, or Peter McCullough.
Yep.
A lot of these people are themselves vaccinated, so yeah, it's a good crew of people over there.
McCullough was another shining light. I would just wait for his podcast to drop throughout COVID, especially those early dark days. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's not buying it. And he had talked about as a physician in a hospital, he was getting the flu shot every year. And I think he is really reevaluating, because he and his co-author just came out with a book. I think CHD published it, about the vaccine myth. So I think he's reevaluating everything. Again, people willing to say, I stood on this ground and the ground is shifting beneath me. I have new information. I need to wrestle with it. And now I'm going to come out with another opinion based on not ideological polarization, but based on what I understand to be true. So again, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Karen.
All right.
Love and Life with Dr. Karen and Pastor Elliot is produced by Tim May and executive producer Dr. Karen Anderson-Abel. For more information about Love and Life, please go to loveandlifemedia.com.